guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. It's Monday, November 29th, and we have got some news out of Fayetteville, Arkansas, and we've got some very big weeks coming up with Josh Duggar and his case. Tomorrow, his trial will start, and today there was a hearing regarding some motions that have been presented to the court about evidence that the prosecutors would like to have admitted into the case and his defense team wants omitted, excluded from this case. Josh Duggar is obviously facing a lot. He's charged in a multiple indictment and he is facing up to 40 years. Because of what the feds say he has done, they want to be able to admit into evidence prior actions that he took back in the early 2000s. Now, these actions have been widely publicized in the media when In Touch in 2015 released a police report from 2006. Josh Duggar never publicly spoke directly about what he had done. He made a statement through his parents' websites. His parents, on the other hand, did go on to Megyn Kelly and discussed what they dealt with way back when and defended themselves as parents, as well as, if you remember, Jill and Jessa spoke out about what happened. It's not in dispute in terms of what happened. It's more in dispute from the court perspective as to whether or not it is actually relevant to this case and if testimony by at least one of the people can be included into the case because of what the defense is calling clergy privilege. The biggest question leading up to today was Jim Bob Duggar going to be in court? Because according to the prosecutors a couple weeks ago, he was impossible to get in touch with. Well, it seems that even though he had been previously avoiding or maybe making it hard for prosecutors to get in touch with him, they were able to subpoena him, and Jim Bob was in court today and he testified for the government. There were notes that were released by the court which state that the court hearing convened at 9:30. They did a procedural history of the case. They talked about a key which included 4 specific individuals, and then Bobby Holt testified along with Jim Bob Duggar. Both sides had arguments by counsel, and then the judge did not make a decision about what was going to happen. Jim Bob Duggar was defiant in court. Now, a source I spoke to told me that, but People magazine actually spoke on the record about what they heard, and it matched what my source told me. So People says that during his testimony, Jim Bob repeatedly said he couldn't remember the details of Josh's admissions, that he had touched the girls, and that had been the girls that had been designated as Jane Does 1 through 4. He took issue with the police report, which was obtained and published by In Touch. He said this was something for a young man to come forward. He said, calling it a juvenile record and a sealed case. He said he couldn't remember when he was asked about the report, called it tabloid information, and he said, I'm not going to allow it. Are you going to allow that? He asked the judge. Literally, he asked the judge if the judge is going to allow tabloids. He says this report is tabloid. He said after the prosecutions asked him to read the copy of the report, he said, I'm not going to do that. He said that his memory was not jogged by reading the report in his head. So he read it and his memory was not jogged. And the judge apparently said to him, if there's an objection to be made, someone will make it, but it won't be you. He said that he recounted that Josh came to him and his wife in 2002 about inappropriate touching, but said he didn't remember his exact words. And so he said, we were shocked this had happened, but we were thankful he came on his own and told us. He had told me that he had touched some of the girls when they were sleeping on their chests, but didn't wake up. But Bobby specifically recalled Josh repeatedly admitting in 2003 and 2005 to inappropriately touching 4 Jane Does over and under their clothes. Jim Bob said that he and Michelle took Josh to the police in 2006 on the recommendation of Jim Holt, and Josh confessed everything to Arkansas State Police. He said, "We tried to handle this in-house. It was a very difficult time in our family's life." Jim Bob, apparently during his testimony, complained that for you guys to use a tabloid to bring it back up is very unprofessional. So he's blaming, again, the tabloids for this. And the judge said, "Mr. Duggar, I recognize this is perhaps a very unfair position that you're placed in, and I appreciate that this is not a debate." So he says that Josh received spiritual counseling from Jim and Bobby. And he said, "We appreciated their wisdom, good wisdom on how to conquer those challenges. They said that they would keep it confidential." He also said that his daughter saw counselors at the same time. So Jim Bob's foggy memory is at issue here. And the judge seemed to be not super impressed with the fact that he was being so defiant during his testimony. The biggest argument here is whether or not Bobby's testimony will be allowed in court, because the defense is arguing that Josh confided in Bobby under a clergy privilege, believing that she was clergy to him. And so by telling her about what he had done, the conversations that they had had were confidential. Now, the prosecutors argued that this was not client clergy privilege, because Bobby is not clergy. She's actually the wife of someone that was an elder at a church, but she was not in a physical capacity, working as a physical capacity as an elder of the church when she was speaking with Josh. But rather, she was the mother of a girl that Josh Duggar was interested in. And so because of that, she and Josh had conversations. The prosecutors argued that the clergy privilege does not apply to Bobby, and the defense says that it does. And Bobby Holt, she testified to what Josh had told her all those years ago about what happened and what he had done. The judge was unable to make a decision, and instead what he asked is for there to be a ruling, a brief. So they want briefs from both the prosecution and from the defense, and that will be brought into court tomorrow, and the judge will review and make his decision before jury selection starts tomorrow afternoon. So at this point, we don't know whether or not they were going to be admitting the police report, or if testimony by Jim Bob and by Bobby will be admitted. Say that the judge reviews everything and is like, well, this actually is not a clergy. There's also exceptions in the state of Arkansas that allow for an exception in the case of clergy privilege if it involves CA of any kind or SA. So they could look at it from that exception perspective if they deem Bobby to be clergy. Otherwise, if they deem her not to be clergy, they may not be able to exclude her testimony. But it seems like whatever Bobby has for testimony, they don't want in this trial. So here's the thing. Jim Bob, who can't remember things, could have his memory cross-examined by prosecutors if a judge decides to allow this to be admitted into court. So if a judge says, hey, yep, this is admissible because this does fall under a pattern of behavior, and there are laws and rules that suggest that in anything that involves CM, we are able to bring in prior acts by the individual to show a pattern of behavior. The only time a case like this has been one-off appeal is when a court actually did not allow evidence like this into the case. So I feel like a judge in this case is going to be erring on the side of what this district has upheld in the past, as well as making sure that all the decisions that they make in this case are solid so that they cannot be lost on an appeal. This is a very high profile case, so the judge is going to want to be extremely diligent in making sure that everything is examined. So if Jim Bob, say the judge gets the briefs tomorrow and makes the decision that it wasn't clergy privilege, Jim Bob's testimony can be admitted, and so can the police report. We're going to admit this as evidence. Jim Bob, if he takes the stand and he is asked questions about what happened back in 2002 and 2003, if he says, I don't know, if his account is different than what he said in 2015, they can actually bring in his statements that he made on Megyn Kelly. So if he were to say in court, say that he can't recall, or if he were to minimize the testimony, say by saying that it was only over the close, which is something that he stated on the Megyn Kelly show interview, but he also did state, but there was a couple other times. We know in the police report that there was more to it than simply over the close. And we also know that based on the prosecution statements that there was testimony from at least one person that it involved digital actions by Josh. So with that being said, if Jim Bob were to deny that, they can bring back his public statements on the Megyn Kelly interview. So Jim Bob will have to get very crafty because perjury is a crime, and so you don't want to perjure yourself. In regards to, were any of the siblings there? Who was there? No siblings attended this event, or no, there was no siblings in attendance at the hearing. The only people that were seen going into the courthouse by the media were Josh and Anna. Jim Bob did testify, like I said, so he was there. It's not clear to me if Michelle was there or not. And I'm not sure about whether or not, any other friends of the family were there. The judge has already made specific rules here, and that is that there are going to be limited seats for the hearing, and nobody is allowed to bring in any electronics. So you can't bring in laptops, you can't bring in tablets, you can't bring in phones. There's no recording devices that will be allowed. So the only people that will be allowed will be as many, I think, that can fit in the room, and then they will have an overflow room for other people that can't fit into the room, but there's no recording devices. So if the media does go in, they have to take notes. They have to use like a pen and paper. They cannot use anything electronic. So if you're wondering if there's going to be sound bites or anything like that, the answer is no. Strict order from the judge on that. So we have strict orders from the judges. We also know that there was witness testimony today. There are more witnesses that are going to be slated to testify in this case. And the other thing is, with regards to witnesses that will be testifying, it does seem like the sisters will not be called, because the testimony here apparently is not going to come from his sisters. It's going to be coming from either Jim Bob or Bobby Holt. So my one question here is that while the siblings have said that, they want the truth, how do you get the truth if you ignore what's happening in the court? Do you go to the hearing, or do you avoid the truth by avoiding the court? I would think that there would be an interest by some of them to go, or want to go to this hearing, so that they can finally get the truth, although they might not want to go because they might not want to have to deal with the press. But at the same breath, can you really get the truth if you're having it filtered to you by your dad, by your mom, if you don't really read the court records? There's a lot of questions here. And then I had an opportunity to speak to some locals in the area that said there has been a lot of pushback locally against the Duggar name, and that some businesses that are associated with the Duggars will and have been losing business because of this case. So even though people aren't Josh Duggar owned businesses, even with distant relatives or cousins, have been losing business as a result of the trial, because Josh Duggar's name has really put a bad taste in the mouth of so many people in the area. So the casualties of Josh's case don't just affect Josh, but affect everyone in the family. It's been a ripple effect, I'm told. People are not interested in supporting Duggar-owned businesses of any kind, and some are losing business, I was told. Someone I spoke to basically said that if he is convicted, the Duggar name is only going to become worse in the area. So sadly, this case is not just going to affect Josh, but it's also going to affect his siblings, his cousins, his aunts, his uncles, anyone that's in that area that has been doing business, working, trying to establish themselves. The Duggar name is in the mud right now. So unfortunately, this isn't just about Josh, and directly or indirectly, everyone is being held accountable by the public locally, I'm told. So there's a lot of anger at the whole family right now, which is really unfortunate, because it's only a couple people here that actually are responsible. And Josh is the only one responsible for what happened in this case. Jim Bob Duggar is not on trial, and his, previous behaviors are also not on trial. And while Jim Bob may not be on trial, his memory and the way that he is still protecting Josh is concerning to me. And knowing that he could very well be a witness for the federal government and his inability to so willingly forget public statements that he made on a Megyn Kelly interview or things that he told to the police, trying to deflect and gaslight away from this being tabloid. Whether it's tabloid or not, this report existed. The investigation happened, and Jim Bob's statements were made to police about his son. When presented with an opportunity to tell the truth, Jim Bob, again, protected his son, minimized what his son had done, and threw his daughters to the wolves. Maybe this is going to be the final straw. Maybe the girls might wake up, but I urge these girls that if they care about the truth, they need to pay attention to this trial. All of the kids need to pay attention to this trial. Do not be fooled by Jim Bob Duggar. Open your eyes and realize that there are statements he made in 2015 and 2006, and today in court he couldn't remember. That's not how an honest person who's Christian behaves. That's bearing false witness, and it's not Christian-like. But it's Jim Bob Duggar. These are my opinions. I'd like to hear more from you. Bye, guys.